Hey friends, and welcome to another video. Today we are going to be tackling a big pantry restock. This isn't just going to the grocery store, but it's also baking tons of snacks and breads and different things. I believe I have 4 or 5 different things that we are going to be making today, and I'm also going to be sharing with you guys the recipes. So I'm so excited for this, so please stick around and stay tuned for all of those recipes. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, recently I have been in a huge rut as a homemaker slash stay-at-home mom. I don't know what it is. I feel like it's just the summer in general. It makes me feel a little bit less productive because the summer is just filled with so much spontaneity. There isn't really a routine or a schedule. You just kind of go with the flow, and because of that, I've kind of lost touch of my restocking my pantry and planning out dinners and all of that stuff. And so I really wanted to do that this time around because I kind of saw it really lacking in my family structure, and so I wanted to really bring that back. So the first part of my pantry restock is I always make a grocery list, and I make my list on Instacart. I don't buy from Instacart, but I like to use it as a way of seeing whether or not I am keeping in budget. Mind you, Instacart typically prices their food a little bit higher, so when you go into the actual grocery store and buy the food, it typically comes out maybe a few dollars less than it would have been buying it from the app. But I like to do it so I can see everything, see what the store may be out of stock in. It's just really helpful if you are trying to stick to a budget versus making a list going into the store and you're seeing your total as you're checking out. So this is something I like to do, and I always start with making a list of my essentials first, like milk, eggs, butter, sugar, like all of those different things. I will mark those down first before I search up dinners or anything, because it kind of helps me to know, okay, like if we need more essentials this time, then I may need to go a little bit cheaper with dinners to keep things in budget. But for the most part, when I am planning dinners, I will go back and forth from a little bit of a fancier meal that may take a little bit more effort to a meal that is not lower quality, but just doesn't have as many steps. So for example, if I one day made a very fancy balsamic chicken that had like tomatoes, balsamic glaze, like all of those things, then the next day I would make something as simple as like beef, rice, and veggies. So it kind of balances things out from, very mundane to things that take a little bit of effort, but also in terms of your budget, it kind of helps to balance things out in that way, because buying beef is a lot cheaper than buying chicken, and buying rice is a lot cheaper sometimes than buying a whole bunch of like tomatoes and toppings and stuff like that. So that's something that I like to do, and I will scour Pinterest for my recipes. Pinterest is my favorite place to go. I have like a Pinterest board that has like a bunch of dinners in it, and if I'm just not fond of the dinners in there, then I will look up more like I did this time, and I will see what ingredients I need versus what I need to buy. I don't like to buy a lot of like extra ingredients. So like what I mean by that is if it requires like extra spices that I don't have, or I think one of my recipes said like Dijon mustard, and I don't have Dijon mustard just casually on hand. Sometimes I'll try and stay away from those and stick to things that are closer to home, if that makes sense. But occasionally I will go out of that bound and just make whatever I feel like. So that is kind of how I choose to just meal prep and make my grocery list. We did go over budget this time, and I do tend to find that at least every other month or like every 2 months, I find that our budget typically is a little bit bigger than our average because we are needing more staple things like flour or toilet paper or things like that. So our typical budget is $275. I think this time it was more like $300, which is not ideal. I don't know about you, but I hate it when like the first of the month expenses are just like so daunting, and it felt like that this month. But yeah, so I would say in an average month for our family, we will probably spend anywhere between $600 to $700 worth of groceries. So, all right, friends, let's get started in the kitchen. We're going to be starting with bagels, and then we're going to be making a yummy muffin. So, first things first, we are going to start with 1.25 cups of warm water, 2 1/4 teaspoons of instant or active dry yeast or instant quick rise yeast, one of those, and then 1 tablespoon of sugar. You're going to mix that up, and then you're going to let it sit until foamy. So for me, this is about 10 minutes or so. Once that's foamy, you're going to add in your flour. So I am using all-purpose flour. You can use whole wheat flour. You can use bread flour, which is probably preferred, but you're going to add in 3.5 cups of flour, 1.5 teaspoons of salt, and you're going to mix that really well. You're going to knead it for about 5 to 7 minutes, I believe, and then you're going to place it in a greased bowl and let it sit for 1 hour. So while we're waiting for our bagel dough to rise, we're going to start on the muffins. So with the muffins, I ended up making my own muffin liners because you can make them at home with parchment paper. It does take more time and just tedious task, but I wanted to do this to kind of get that homemade bakery type feel. So this muffin recipe is a bakery style strawberry jam muffins. For this, you start with 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour, 1 tablespoon of baking powder, half a teaspoon of baking soda, and half a teaspoon of salt as your dry ingredients. And then for your wet ingredients, you do half a cup of unsalted butter melted, 1/4 cup of coconut oil, 1 cup of granulated sugar, 2 large eggs, 1 cup of buttermilk, which if you don't know how to make buttermilk, it is 1 cup of whole milk, and then 1 tablespoon of lemon juice, and let that sit for 5 minutes before adding it into your mixture. And then you're going to do 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. Now you start the process of putting it all together. So I obviously have my muffin liners, and I'm going to do half a scoop of the batter, and then do a little teaspoon, maybe a little bit more than a teaspoon of strawberry jam, and then another half scoop on top. And then you can also put strawberry jam on top too. And then you can swirl it around with a toothpick. I didn't do that. I just kind of let it sit on the top. So you're gonna bake at 425 for the first 5 minutes, and then you're gonna reduce the oven to 350 for 14 to 16 minutes, and you're gonna get these beautiful bakery style looking muffins. By the time I made my muffins and baked them, our dough has doubled in size and it is ready to shape. I have to be honest and say I was not very proud of these bagels. They came out really small and puny, and I think next time I need to not make the hole so big because it's just not a classic bagel that you can like smear cream cheese on, if you know what I mean. So next time I think I'm going to let them sit out a little bit longer. Then you're just gonna let those sit out as they are for about 30 minutes before we start the boiling process. Before you even bake your bagels, you do a baking soda and honey bath. So you do 1 tablespoon baking soda, 1 tablespoon honey in a pot full of water, and you are going to get that thing boiling. Once your pot is boiling, then what you're gonna do is you're gonna stick at least 4 bagels in at a time, and you're gonna boil each side for 1 minute. So one side 1 minute, the other side 1 minute, and then you're gonna take them out, put them on a tray with parchment paper, and you are gonna coat them in an egg wash. Then you're gonna bake the bagels for 20 to 25 minutes at 425 degrees. Next, we're going to be making my not sourdough bread. We're going to start off with 500 grams of either bread flour or whole wheat flour. Next, you're going to add 375 grams of warm water, and you're just going to mix that up. Once it's all mixed together, you are going to set that aside for 30 minutes. 10 minutes before your 30-minute timer goes off, you're going to start your yeast mixture. So you're going to do a 1/4 teaspoon of active dry yeast and 60 grams of warm water. Once you've let the yeast mixture sit for 10 minutes and get it foamy, you're going to add it to your flour water mixture from previously, and then you are going to add 10 grams of salt and mix that very well. I used a rolling pin, but then I went in with my hands and mixed it together. So this is going to rise for the next 12 to 16 hours, but for the first 2 to 3 hours of those 12 or 16, you are going to do stretch and folds, and I'm going to show you what that looks like. Essentially, there are 4 corners, and you're going to grab one end, pull it up, push it in, turn the bowl a little bit, pull it up, and push it in. And you're going to do that for 3 or 4 turns every hour for the next 3 hours. So 12 to 16 hours have passed, and I'm going to take some flour my surface, take out the dough, and I am going to shape it into a tight ball and transfer it onto parchment paper, and I'm going to let that sit for at least 1 hour at the most 2 hours before we start baking it. When we bake it, you are going to take your Dutch oven with the lid and you're going to place it in the oven at 480, and you're going to want it to preheat in the oven to start. Then once it is preheated and your dough has been sitting out for an hour or two, you're going to stick the dough with the parchment paper in the Dutch oven and put the lid on for 20 minutes. Once the 20-minute timer goes off, you're going to take the lid off and you're going to leave it in there for another 20 minutes. The very next thing that we're going to be making is chocolate peanut butter granola bars. This is probably the easiest thing I have made in this whole video, but it sustained us for an entire week, and it's just a really sweet and nice snack for on the go. So let me show you how to make it. First, you're going to mix up 3/4 cup of natural peanut butter, 1/3 cup of honey or maple syrup, but honey works a lot better to make the bars stick, and then you're going to do 2 whole eggs. After you've mixed up the wet ingredients, you're going to add 3 cups of old-fashioned rolled oats, and then 1/2 cup of mini chocolate chips. You can also add in different nuts or seeds if you want to, but I just decided to keep this very plain and simple. Then you're going to put the mix and stuff in a 9x9-inch baking dish pan with parchment paper, and you're going to want to press down firmly on this so it all kind of sticks and stays together. Then you're going to bake it at 350 for 15 to 17 minutes. Now this part's really important. Do not cut into it until it is completely cooled down. I would even suggest sticking it in the fridge for a little bit after you've taken it out. I did not wait and it made it very crumbly, so definitely wait until it's completely cooled down to cut into it.